guys, I'm Kya, and it's about time the MCU gave the spotlight to a female superhero, even if she does have to share it.
Antman and the Wasp teaming up.
Follow my lead.
The Wondrous Wasp might not be a solo star yet, but she never gets second billing when it comes to fashion. The Wasp has worn well over 100 different costumes, far more than we can fit in a single video, but there's still a lot we can learn from this subatomic style icon. So wax up your wings and sharpen your stingers, because on this episode of Yellow Spandex, we're talking about the evolution of the Wasp's costume. We start, as always, with the comics, where a charming young socialite named Janet Van Dyne joined the ranks of Marvel's most elite heroes in the early years. When we first met Janet Van Dyne, she was introduced as a spoiled rich girl, but after her father was murdered by an alien, Hank and the readers saw a different side of her. She was tough, resilient, and determined to bring the killers to justice, so Hank recruited her for his fight against evil. But unlike Antman, whose insect powers are purely cybernetic, the Wasp's wings and antennae are actually part of her body. Somehow, Hank convinced this woman he literally just met to let him implant subdermal cells into her skin that would sprout into disgusting insect appendages once she shrunk. He also happened to have a costume ready for her too. I mean, it comes off as slightly creepy to me, but either way, this is the Wasp's classic look. A dynamic red tunic over dark blue leggings with a big pointy helmet, I guess because the comics code wouldn't let them put a stinger on her butt. This was the 60s after all, and she was very much Ant-Man's sidekick, whose portrayal ranged from ditzy to downright sexist. Jan was aloof and flighty, she flirted with Thor to make Hank jealous, and she cared more about looking cute than crushing evil. Stereotypes aside, the Wasp still played a huge role in Marvel's Silver Age. She was a founding member of the Avengers and even gave the team its name. She was there when they discovered Captain America's frozen body, went to battle with the Kree and Skrulls, and led the Avengers in repelling a siege from the Masters of Evil. Almost as impressive, she wore a different outfit every time. Let's dive into the Wasp's wonderful wardrobe. Most superheroes have pretty boring civilian careers. They're usually photographers, reporters, or generic billionaire CEOs.
How did you get the house back from the bank?
I bought the bank.
Janet Van Dyne, on the other hand, was a fashion designer. This was probably just Stan Lee's idea of a girly profession for the first female Avenger, but it became one of her most defining features, and she used her skills to design dozens of new superhero suits for every occasion. It started off subtly as she phased out the pointy helmet, but as her confidence as a hero grew, Jan began making more drastic changes to her wardrobe, with some help from the artist of Marvel, of course. Next to the Kirby classic, this design might be the Wasp's most iconic look. It's surprisingly plain with a high-collared unitard over a contrasting undersuit with no logos or W's in sight. She also completely dropped the helmet to show off her 60s bob. This costume appeared in several different color schemes, but for some reason she kept returning to a McDonald's red and yellow. She eventually settled on a blue and gold palette that would inspire her modern designs, but first she had to make it through the far-out fashion of the 70s. Not all the Wasp's outfits were winners. There were a few unfortunate experiments with plaid, but the costumes kept coming. And when artist George Perez began his legendary stint on the Avengers, the Wasp's wardrobe got even wackier. Perez made Jan's uniform changes part of her persona. He said that she went through so many looks while he was drawing the series, it became almost mandatory for artists who came after him to introduce a new costume, or three. But Perez's flashy fashion sense was hard to follow. His suits ranged from gaudy to gorgeous, filled with interesting colors and outrageous cuts, best exemplified by this disco-tastic design from 1980. It was an extravagant era, but as the 80s came to a close, Jan underwent some serious shakeups before finally landing on the Modern Wasp. The 90s were a period of excess and extremes, where the men were 9-foot-tall Rob Liefeld monstrosities and the women were barely dressed. The male gaze fixated on Jan too, and she wore her fair share of skimpy costumes during this period. Not practical, but cool. But the biggest change came during a 1995 event called The Crossing. After she was mortally wounded by an evil Iron Man, Hank put Jan through the same procedure that gave her initial powers. This time it formed a cocoon around her, and when she emerged, Jan was mutated into an insectoid monster thing. But it looked good. The radical physical changes didn't last long though, because the Avengers sacrificed themselves to stop Onslaught, and when the heroes were reborn, Jan was inexplicably back to her human self. She underwent several more costume changes during this period, but the Wasp eventually found her look for the new millennium. This sleek black and yellow design from 1998 was inspired by the colors of actual wasps, and with a few changes, it would become her most iconic uniform of the modern age. It inspired everything from her Ultimate Incarnation to her MCU design. Currently, Jan is rocking a slightly modified version with a little more armor, but she's not the only wasp zipping around the Marvel Universe right now. Hank Pym's long-lost daughter Nadia has recently resurfaced, and as a superhero in training, Jan has taken her under her wings. Her red and black costume is an homage to the Wasp's origins, which means the pointy helmet is finally back. And just beneath it, she's rocking a modern hairdo that looks suspiciously like Evangeline Lilly from the movies. The Wasp first appeared outside the comics in the same cheapo cartoon her husband did, and like Hank, she popped up in most Avengers adaptations. Her most noteworthy animated appearance has to be Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which basically turned her into a kawaii anime girl. This Jan has some of the shallower aspects of her earlier character, but she matured as the series progressed until it was abruptly canceled in favor of the MCU-esque Avengers Assembles, and yes, I'm still mad.
If you tell me to sit this one out, I'll zap you in your stupid metal face.
I was going to tell you to hit him with everything you've got.
You okay? Did I hurt
Speaking of the MCU, the first Antman movie made some big changes to the lore. Hank and Jan were still the original power couple, but their adventures took place decades in the past. We don't see a lot of Jan's vintage wasp costume, but it looks fairly similar to Ant-Man's, just with a more feminine cut and slightly pointy helmet. Based on what we've seen so far, we'll get a closer look at it in the new movie once Michelle Pfeiffer's Jan returns from the quantum realm. The real MCU Wasp is Hope Van Dyne, Hank and Jan's daughter, who's a combination of Nadia and their child from an alternate future called Hope Pym. We get a peek at her sleek, sleeveless Wasp uniform at the end of Ant-Man.
This is an advanced prototype that your mother and I worked on together. She never got to use it. But now I realize that we were working on it for you.
And it looks like she made some modifications between the first film and the sequel, because in the upcoming movie, she's rocking a costume with some more practical arm protection. Overall, it's a great mix of classic and modern suits with a gold armor design inspired by her current costume and a pointy helmet that harkens her back to her 60s roots. I maybe would have liked it to be a little bolder or brighter, but Hope isn't her mother, she's her own hero, and her suit might just put Paul Rudd to shame.
Hold on, you gave her wings?
And blasters.
So I take it you didn't have that tech available for me?
No, I did.
Lily certainly embraced it more than her male counterparts.
Do I have the most comfortable suit in the MCU? Or have men not had the life experience of being uncomfortable for the sake of looking good?
Either way, Ant-Man and the Wasp are cornerstones in the Marvel Universe, and whether they're taller than skyscrapers or tinier than a tachyon, they're the perfect fit for the MCU. Hey guys, thanks for watching. The Wasp has gone through so many different looks, it's like hard to pick a favorite, but I want to know yours. Which era of the Wasp is most iconic for you? Leave a comment, let me know. Follow us on Twitter at NowNerdOfficial, and as always, please subscribe to